Hello and welcome to another episode of my Kerbal Space Program Science Mode playthrough in the Je Nais Se Quoi Planet Pack. One thing I have done is all of the Athena rocket core stages have had their KS-25 vector engines replaced with Methalox Allosaur engines, which is an engine from the Cryogenic Engines mod that was inspired by a simplified version of the RS-25 Space Shuttle main engine called the Space Transportation Main Engine, that would have been used on a shuttle derivative called the National Launch System, both of which were proposed during a study authorized in 1991. However, the STME nor the NLS rocket it would have been used on made it past the planning stages, but the idea of a simpler RS-25 and what was learned from the NLS study would be used in the development of the RS-68 used on the Delta IV and Delta IV Heavy. But that's just a weird little fact. What's actually going on here is I am launching a probe to scan the Mun ahead of a manned mission, and the reason I'm doing this is so I can get a good idea of where all the biomes are, because what I had planned to do was launch a manned mission with a lander that would do hops across the surface to get science from multiple biomes. However, you will see here in a little bit why I decided that would not be a thing I could do. And so yeah, I think that was just the injection into a Mun flyby you saw there. It's just the last little burn of that third stage. And then here you can see the probe itself doing a mid-course correction to nail a polar orbit around the Mun, or encounter rather. And the reason for a polar orbit is because that is the orbit necessary to do these scans, because with a polar orbit, with each orbit a different part of the Mun is passing under it, and this goes with any other body really, but the Mun is the particular case here. And so there you can see it just did its little burn to get into an orbit, and then another burn happens here in a little bit just to circularize said orbit. And so after time warping for a while, I have a map of the Mun's terrain. And here you can see the rocket I have decided to use to launch this manned mission to the Mun. It's basically the Athena Super Heavy from the previous video. The only difference is the Allosaur engines, and I believe the original Athena Super Heavy only had 2 of those borer boosters, as I'm calling them. Now, the reason why I decided to switch from Hydrolox to Methalox is because Methalox is denser, which means it takes more of it to fill a fuel tank. What this means is I could get more mileage out of Methalox stages than Hydrolox ones. This didn't make the designing of the Mun mission any easier, as I still had trouble getting something that could send a payload onto a flyby or injection of the Mun. That was until I switched out the single Hydrolox Ulysses engines of the 4th stage with 4 Methalox Eagle engines. The funny thing about this is that the Eagle is modeled after the vacuum version of SpaceX's Raptor engine that is going to be used on their fully recoverable Starship rocket, but I have no intention of getting a single part of this stage back to Kerbin. And so what you just saw is what I believe to be the Mun injection burn, and so this thing is just going to do that classic Apollo transposition and docking maneuver to get to the lander. And you'll notice there's a little hub with docking ports between the lander and the command and service module. The reason for this is this thing is going to get all of its data from the Mun, and then those experiments are going to be transferred into the command module. And from there, the command and service module will dock to a lab in high orbit above the Mun and do some research. And what that docking hub is there for is it's just for future expansions to the station, because it really only has one usable docking port. I mean, It does have one of those junior docking ports, but I've never really seen that as a realistic way to transfer Kerbals. It just seems too small. But yeah, I think that was the insertion burn, and that also kind of got a nice low periapsis around the MUN setup. And then this burn right here is just circularizing the orbit that I already had set up. And then from there, I just went ahead and went into the scan map and began picking out waypoints for landing. Unfortunately, I had accidentally mashed the shift key and brought up the throttle by a little bit unintentionally. Luckily, I was pointed somewhere between prograde and triangle with a dot in the center, so all that this caused was a higher, more inclined orbit than I really wanted. However, this would mean if I was going to dock to the station, I was going to have to only put the lander down in one spot, so that way I could save as much as its fuel as possible in order to transfer all of that into the command and service module, so that way I would be sure that I would have enough to dock to the station and return to Kerbin. And I have yet to get that thing back to Kerbin, so I really don't know if it's going to make it. But whatever, here's the landing now. And so here you can see just running through the experiments. Feel free to read these if you can. You might have to pause the video, I don't know. And so with all of that done, all that is left to do is the EVA experiments and plant a flag. And so Bob just got out, planted a flag, and then took a surface sample and did an EVA report. And I named this mission Artemis because like it's a MUN mission, but I didn't want to just steal the Apollo name, but then I ended up using the name of the actual Artemis program because I couldn't think of anything else related to Apollo. And if I'm going to do these naming schemes like this, I should probably get more familiar with Greek mythology. So, in the meantime, while science is being processed in orbit around the MUN, I thought it would be cool to build the space station, and here you can see I am launching the first module on a stripped down version of the Athena 1. And it's very Delta 4-esque, and once I realized this, I couldn't help but to think to strap 3 of these core stages together for payloads that don't warrant an Athena Super Heavy, but are also too much for an Athena 1 with bore boosters. You won't see a rocket like that in this video, but I would watch future episodes and see if a design like that pops up. And so you'll notice for the station there's this weird bit with one of those slanted fuel tanks. That was my attempt at recreating the docking adapter for the shuttle. Now, why would I want to do something like that? Well, you see, it's possible I made a shuttle. This shuttle I've built launches off of a modified Athena Super Heavy first stage with only 2 bore boosters, an additional Allosaur engine in the center, and the engines furthest from the orbiter are tilted to compensate for the offset center of mass caused by the side-mounted shuttle. And you'll notice at the point in the flight where the bores ran out of fuel and are ditched, the tilt of the outermost engines overcompensates for the center of mass to the point where it is better if they are shut down along with the center engine. This also has the added benefit of saving fuel by running less engines. And then here you can see what we'll just call the orbital engines finalize the orbit, and those are 2 Wolfhound engines, which are the Making History DLC's equivalent to the engine used on the Apollo Command and Service module. It was also the same engine that was used on my little Command and Service module for the MUN mission. And the procedure for adding parts to the station with this is basically undock the part, dock it to the shuttle, have the shuttle dock it to the station. And the previous mission did a little bit of damage to the station, and there was also a docking port that was supposed to be on the station when it launched that it didn't have, so these little repairs are going to have to be made in this mission. So here you can see Bill got out of the shuttle and added the missing docking port. He then proceeded to stock up on repair kits and fix the broken solar panel. And just went ahead and opened it and then got back onto the shuttle. And so yeah, with that additional solar wing deployed, there is not much else left to do on the station, and the crew can return back to Kerbin. So, one issue I have with landing the shuttle is, one, it is very stall prone, and apparently that has to do with the fact that the wings I'm using are from a mod called Procedural Wings, which are just basically custom wings. And apparently they don't really generate that much lift in proportion to how much drag there is in the stock game. Although there is a mod called Ferrum Aerospace that overhauls the aerodynamic system in Kerbal Space Program. But I'm not sure I really want to go through all that trouble just to get this thing to work, because I've heard Ferrum Aerospace research be described as something as simple as things that barely work in the stock game don't work in it, to flying with the mod is learning to fly again in this game. And another thing you'll notice is the splashdown landings. This is the second one in a row. There's going to be more, because a mod I have called Trajectories that is supposed to tell me approximately where something will land once it has been deorbited is not working for some reason. I've tried installing it through CCAN, I've tried installing it myself, and just nothing I do seems to work, so I'm really lost here, so I'm having to eyeball this completely, which just leads to me constantly missing. And so here you can see I am launching the stripped down Athena 1 again. This time it is to launch a new docking adapter for the shuttle to the station, because I installed the HabTech mod, which adds a part for this docking adapter I've been talking about, and I decided this was such a little piece I wasn't gonna waste the time and effort that has to be put into launching and landing a shuttle into this little thing, so I just sent it up to the station with an Athena 1 with a little tug. And so I just docked to the adapter that was already there, undocked it to be deleted in the tracking station later, docked it where the old one was, and docked the tug to the back of the station for later use. So one obvious thing I just want to point out about my shuttle design here is this has more in common with Buran Energia than the American shuttle. And that's kind of intentional, because like for as long as I've known that the Buran Energia was a thing, I've always had this weird idea of like, what if there was like a similar setup, but like it used a modified version of the American shuttle and launched off of a shuttle-derived rocket like the SLS or something. It's just a weird idea that I've had kicking around in my head for a while and decided to put into this series. So I almost forgot to mention, in some weird attempt to try and get the shuttle to be able to get back to the Space Center, I thought it would be a good idea to add grid fins and jet engines. Now the jet engines honestly make the most sense, because with jet engines the shuttle can just propel itself. It doesn't really matter where it deorbits as long as it has enough fuel. And with the grid fins I was thinking that would help it guide itself on the way down and also slow down. But the more I think about it, the slower this thing goes, the less lift the wings can generate and the more likely drag is to happen, so the grid fins may have been more of a bad idea than anything, but they're not going anywhere, so they're just kind of a part of the design now. Besides, I mean, if anything, they double as air brakes and a control surface, which is pretty much what they're supposed to do, if not exactly. Well, this is where I'm going to end this video. If you're listening to this, then thank you for watching this whole thing, and if you liked it, then feel free to leave a like. If you didn't like it, you can go ahead and dislike it. If you have any criticism of this video, or you want to tell me anything specific that you liked or disliked about it, then feel free to leave a comment below. If you want to hear about it every time I upload, please consider subscribing, clicking the bell, and enabling all notifications. That is all from me for now. Goodbye.